Hello, my name is Valeria. This is my new original story on my channel. Subscribe and enjoy.
She was sold to pay her father's debt. The buyer didn't know she was his fated mate, and she had no idea he was the king. Emma has always known her worth, not in the way that costs money, in the way that means something harder to price. She has worked since she was 14, cleaned floors that other people dirtied, eaten last so others could eat first, smiled at people who looked through her like she was made of glass. She knows her worth, and she knows what it means when her father cannot pay what he owes. It means her. The debt collector's men do not knock twice. They take inventory. They remove what has value. And Emma, healthy, young, no husband, no pack, no wolf that anyone has ever seen shift, happens to be the single most valuable thing in a house that burned through its savings 3 years ago. She does not beg. She does not run. She packs one bag, because Emma has always known something else, too. Wherever they are taking her, it cannot possibly be worse than staying. She does not know how wrong she is about that. She also does not know how spectacularly, impossibly right she is. Prologue. She was standing in the debt hall when she realized that the man who had bought her was afraid. Not of her. She was certain of that much. Emma was 22 years old, 5 feet and 4 inches of stubborn composure, wrapped in a dress that had been mended so many times it barely remembered what it had originally looked like. There was nothing frightening about her. Not even the people who disliked her were afraid of her. But the man in the gray cloak, who had just paid 3 times her asking price, without flinching, without negotiating, without even looking at the auctioneer, had gone very still the moment she turned to face him. Like he had not expected her to look directly at him, like that was somehow the dangerous thing. He turned away immediately. She watched the back of his head and noticed his jaw was tight. His hands, large and gloved, were also tight. He was gripping something under that cloak, like a man holding himself together by the friction of his own fingers. She had no idea who he was. She had no idea why he had paid that much. She had no idea why. When she pulled in a breath through her nose, something in her chest responded to his scent, like a compass needle swinging to north. She filed all of those things away under problems to solve later. Then she picked up her bag, lifted her chin, and followed a stranger into the rest of her life. She did not know his name. She did not know his title. She did not know that the guards who materialized around him when he stepped outside were there not because he was wealthy, but because there were people in the world who would very much like him dead. She did not know any of it, but her body, which had always known things her mind needed longer to process, was very quiet, in a way it had never been before. Not afraid. Something else entirely. Chapter 1. The debt auction house on Mercer Lane was the kind of place that pretended to be something else. It called itself a labor brokerage. It had a painted sign with clean letters. The men at the door wore decent coats. If you walked past it quickly enough, and did not read the board posted beside the entrance, the one that listed persons available for acquisition, along with their assessed value and outstanding liens, you might mistake it for something ordinary. Emma had walked past it 100 times. She had always read the board. She had read it today, too, when they brought her here with her hands technically free, but her options anything but. Her own name was at the top of the list, written in the careful lettering of someone who did not know her and had assessed her purely by category. Female. 22. No claimed pack affiliation. No mate bond recorded. No visible shift documented. No dependent children. No property. Physically sound. Reason for listing. Settlement of debt. Collateral transfer. Creditor of record. House Marrow. Below her name, the debt figure. Below that, the minimum acceptable bid. She had looked at it for a long moment. Then she had walked inside. The hall was smaller than she expected. Stone walls, high windows that let in light, but not warmth. 2 rows of wooden chairs for the bidders. A raised platform that was trying very hard not to look like a stage and failing. A handful of people ahead of her in the process, each standing through their own humiliation with varying degrees of composure. Emma chose a spot at the end of the line and stood straight. She was not going to fold. She had decided that before she arrived. Whatever happened, she would not fold. The bidder rows were mostly men, older, the kind who had enough money to be here and enough ruthlessness to actually participate. She recognized 2 faces from the merchant district. She recognized one man as the pack alpha of the Western Territory, a broad and unpleasant person who was known for running a large household and treating the people in it as inventory. She did not look at him for long. The auction moved through the others ahead of her. A young man bought for apprenticeship labor, an older woman, domestic service, a teenager who looked terrified and was bought by someone who turned out to be a relative, which was some small mercy in an otherwise unmerciful room. Then Emma's name. She stepped up. The auctioneer began his recitation, and she stood very still and let her gaze move across the bidder rows with no expression whatsoever. She had practiced this in the mirror that morning. Composure as armor, stillness as control over the only thing she had left. The Western Alpha leaned forward slightly. That was bad. A merchant she did not recognize was writing something in his ledger. The minimum bid was called. 2 voices answered. The Western Alpha. The ledger merchant. Emma breathed slowly through her nose and did not change her expression. The bidding went 3 rounds. The merchant dropped out. She thought briefly that it was going to be the Western Alpha, and she began constructing, in the quiet back of her mind, a plan for how to survive that. Then a 3rd voice spoke from the back of the room. Not loud, not aggressive, just clear and certain and carrying. A number so far above the current bid that the room actually went quiet for a moment. Emma turned. The man in the back row was wearing a gray traveling cloak, hood partially down, showing dark hair, a jaw that looked like it had been drawn by someone in a precise mood. He was sitting very still, not leaning forward, not consulting a ledger. He said the number once and did not elaborate. The auctioneer looked at the Western Alpha. The Western Alpha looked at the man in the back row for a long moment. Then he sat back. The merchant did not re-enter. No one else spoke. The auctioneer called it. Emma stood on the platform and watched the man in the gray cloak stand and make his way toward the desk to complete the paperwork. And she thought, he paid 3 times the going rate for a wolfless woman with no pack, no connections, and no particular skills that should be worth anything in this room. People did not overpay at debt auctions, not unless they wanted something specific. She needed to figure out what it was. When the paperwork was done, he finally looked at her again. His eyes were a gray so dark they were almost charcoal, and they moved over her face with an expression she could not immediately name. Not desire, not the calculating look of someone appraising an investment. Something else. Something that looked uncomfortably like recognition. "I have a bag," she said. "I know," he answered. His voice was deep and controlled, and she noticed that he was careful with it, the way people were careful with things that had weight. "What do you need from me?" she asked. "Domestic service? Kitchen work? Because I should tell you now that I will not be kept in a locked room, and I will not be available for anything outside of regular work hours, and I will not pretend that this arrangement is something it is not." He looked at her. There was a pause that lasted exactly long enough to make her wonder if she had already ruined this. "Kitchen work," he said finally. "Nothing else." "Good," Emma said. He nodded once. Then he picked up her bag before she could reach for it, which was so surprising that she forgot to object, and he walked out into the street. She followed him. She noticed, as she fell into step behind him, that 3 other men materialized from various positions around the street the moment he stepped outside. Quiet men, well-dressed, watching the surroundings with the specific focus of people who were paid to notice threats. Guards. She filed that away. His scent reached her again as the wind shifted, and that compass needle sensation moved through her chest a second time, stronger now. She filed that away too, under a separate category, one she was not ready to open yet. Chapter 2. The journey took 3 hours. He rode. She was given a horse as well, which was unexpected. She had prepared herself for the back of a supply cart. They did not speak during the ride. She spent the time watching the landscape shift from town to road, to the kind of territory that existed between places, where the trees grew tall and the settlements thinned. Then the trees opened, and Emma stopped her horse without meaning to. It was not a house. It was not an estate in the usual sense. It was a compound spread across several acres, surrounded by a low wall that was decorative in the way that very effective barriers sometimes pretended to be. The main building was enormous, 3 stories of stone, dozens of windows, built correctly the first time, and maintained with the kind of attention that required serious, sustained resources. On the gate, a crest she recognized. She went very still. She had seen that crest exactly once before, in a history text borrowed from a market shelf when she was 16. It had been in a chapter about the territorial structure of the northern regions, about the alphas who governed them, and at the very top, above all the regional crests, had been this one, the King's Crest. The compound was royal property, which meant the man beside her was. Emma made herself breathe normally. She was very, very good at making herself breathe normally. A woman in the uniform of a senior housekeeper met them in the courtyard, efficient, silver-haired, with the bearing of someone who had managed large and complicated things for a long time. "I'll take her to orientation," the housekeeper said. "The rest is prepared." He nodded. He did not look at Emma before he rode toward the inner courtyard. She watched him go. "Come with me," the housekeeper said. Emma came. The rules were simple. "North Wing is restricted access," the housekeeper, Mrs. Crane, said as she walked Emma through the ground floor. "The upper floors are private quarters. You will not go there without being called. You will not wander. You will do your assigned work, keep your head down, and stay out of the way." "What is my assigned work?" Emma asked. "Kitchen assistance. 6 in the morning. Finish at 8 in the evening. Sunday afternoon free." Mrs. Crane paused at a corridor intersection and looked at her. "I understand you have no pack affiliation." "That is correct. You are outside the structure, which makes things simpler, and also requires that you be particularly careful. Some members of staff will not respect boundaries that a pack structure would otherwise enforce. Emma met her eyes. I can enforce my own boundaries. Mrs. Crane looked at her for a moment. Yes, she said, as if she had just confirmed something she had suspected. I imagine you can. She was shown a small, clean room in the servants' quarters. A window, a bed, a wash basin, a small dresser. It was considerably more than she had had in her father's house for the past year. She put her bag on the bed and looked at the room. The compass sensation had faded to a low hum somewhere behind her sternum, quiet and persistent. She pressed her hand briefly to her chest, then dropped it. She had work to do in the morning. She slept. She broke the first rule on her second day, not on purpose. The north wing was off limits. She understood why. She had no intention of going there. Then she heard the child. It was the particular sound a child makes when they are lost and trying not to panic about it. That very controlled, very small attempt to stay quiet while being afraid. High and thin and trying to be nothing. Emma had made that sound herself when she was 7, alone in a market that had swallowed her, and the memory of it moved through her before her brain had finished processing the question of whether this was her problem. Her body decided it was. She put her tray down on a side table and went around the corner. The girl was maybe 4 years old. Light hair, pale skin, enormous dark eyes that were currently very wet. She was sitting on the second step of the restricted staircase, with her lower lip trembling with the effort of not making this worse. She was wearing a small blue dress and one shoe. "Hello," Emma said. The girl looked at her. "I lost the other one," she said, referring to the shoe. "All right," Emma said. "Where did you last have it?" "Down there." The girl pointed vaguely down the restricted corridor. Emma looked at the corridor, then at the girl. "Wait here," she said. She went down the corridor. The shoe was easy to find, 2 doors down, sitting in the middle of the floor. Emma picked it up and turned back. The girl had not waited. She was at the end of the corridor, near a door that stood slightly open, leaning forward to peer through the gap. "I said to wait," Emma said, walking toward her, and the girl turned with an expression of pure, unrepentant curiosity that was so clear and unguarded that Emma felt her chest do something inconvenient. She crouched and put the shoe back on the small foot and tied it. "There," she said. "Now, where are you supposed to be?" "In the garden," the girl said, "but my shoe came off." "That happens," Emma said. "I will take you to the garden." She stood and held out her hand, and the girl took it without hesitation, with the absolute trust of a small person who had not yet learned to be careful, and they walked back toward the main hall. Emma did not see him until she turned the corner. He was standing at the corridor entrance. The controlled man from yesterday was here now, without the cloak, in plain, dark clothing, and there was no clothing in the world that would make this man look plain. She had seen alphas before. She knew what alpha presence felt like, that particular quality that a room took on when one was in it. This was not that. This was beyond that, in the way a hurricane is beyond a strong wind. The girl beside Emma made a happy sound and pulled her hand free. "Papa," she said, and walked forward. He bent down and picked her up in one smooth motion, and when she pressed her face against his neck, something went out of his face, replaced by an expression so unguarded that Emma looked away out of instinct. When she looked back, he was looking at her. "She lost her shoe," Emma said. "I heard her on the staircase." A silence. "The staircase is inside the restricted wing," he said. "I noticed that," Emma said. "I retrieved her shoe and brought her back. I will not be going into the restricted wing again." He held her gaze for a long moment. "What is your name?" he asked. "Emma," she said. "I arrived yesterday. Kitchen staff." "I know," he said. He said it the same way he had said it at the debt hall, as if "I know" meant something more than 2 words, as if it was the end of a sentence that had started somewhere else. Emma looked at him. He looked at her. The compass sensation in her chest became briefly, uncomfortably loud. She dropped her gaze, nodded once, and walked back toward the main hall. She heard him say, behind her, very quietly, as if he had not intended to say it at all, "Thank you." Chapter 3. The child's name was Lyra. Emma found this out from the kitchen, where people talked the way people always talked when they thought no one important was listening. Cook was a large, warm-tempered woman named Bet, who had been in this household for 15 years. Ella and Petra, the 2 other kitchen girls, were younger and found everything interesting and spoke accordingly. Emma learned to time her movements to coincide with moments when Petra was talking. "She was not supposed to be here at all," Petra was saying on Emma's 3rd morning, while Emma worked bread dough with the kind of focus that looked like absorption, but was actually strategic listening. Lady Mary's brought her when she came back from the Southern Territory. She said she was her niece, the child of a cousin who died, but everyone knows. "Knows what?" Ella asked. "That the girl is his." Petra glanced toward the kitchen door. "Lyra is his daughter. Lady Mary's lied about the connection to protect the mother's family, but there is not a single person in this household who does not know the truth." Emma kept working the dough. "And the mother?" Ella asked. "Gone," Petra said, in the flat tone that meant the answer was permanent. "Before Lyra was born. It was an arrangement, not a bond, and Lord Cassius never speaks of it, and no one asks." Emma noted the name. Cassius. She noted the rest of it, too. Filed it away, and kept her expression exactly as focused on the bread dough as it needed to be. What she did not do, for the rest of that morning, was let herself think about the way he had picked up that little girl, the ease of it, the completeness of the attention. She concentrated very hard on not thinking about that. She was mostly successful. The 2nd rule she broke was not her fault. On her 5th day, Bet sent her to the lower-level stores to take inventory. She went with a clipboard and a candle and worked efficiently. When she came back up, she took the wrong staircase. The building was larger than it appeared, which Emma was beginning to think was intentional, and she went up 2 flights before she realized the corridor she was standing in was not the kitchen corridor. It was wood-paneled, warmer, quieter, different. Then she looked at the door at the end of the corridor, which was open, and in the room beyond it, she saw Lyra. Lyra was sitting on the floor surrounded by building blocks, constructing something with great concentration. Emma registered all of this, and took one careful step back toward the staircase. Then Lyra looked up, saw her, and her face opened like a window. "Emma," she said. "I am sorry," Emma said, already turning. "Wrong staircase. I am going." "Wait," said a voice. Not the woman reading nearby. She turned back. Cassius was standing in the doorway of an adjacent room, holding a document. He was not wearing his formal, controlled expression. He looked like someone who had been working and had not expected company, which meant his face was doing less of the careful maintenance it did when he was braced for interaction. He looked, she thought, somewhat human. "It is the wrong staircase," Emma said. "I apologize. It will not happen again." "You were in the stores?" he asked. "Inventory. Bet sent me." He nodded slowly. Lyra had abandoned her blocks and was now standing at the doorway, looking between them with the bright, uncomplicated interest of a 4-year-old, monitoring a situation she found promising. "Papa," she said, "can Emma stay?" "Emma has work," Emma said, at the same time as Cassius said nothing. The nothing was somehow louder. "Emma has work," Emma repeated to fill it. "Of course," Cassius said finally. "I will have someone mark the staircases more clearly." "Thank you," Emma said. She went back to the staircase. She made it down one full flight before she had to stop and put her hand against the stone wall and breathe. The compass in her chest was loud, not like a direction now, like a pull. She pressed her palm flat against the cool stone and waited for it to quiet. It took longer than she wanted. That night, she lay in her small room and forced herself to be honest. She had grown up in pack territory without a pack. She knew enough about shifter biology to know what a mate bond felt like. The recognition, the pull, the sense of something clicking into place. She also knew that she had no wolf. She had never shifted. She had been tested twice as a child by healers who had concluded, apologetically, that she had the genetics but not the expression. She should not be feeling a mate bond. She was not feeling a mate bond. She was feeling the result of stress and upheaval and proximity to a powerful alpha. And her biology was doing something reflexive that meant nothing, and it would settle down. This was a completely reasonable explanation. She went with it. If you are staying with this story, if you have felt every pull, every almost, every moment Emma fights to hold herself back from something she cannot name, then you belong here. Subscribe now. Turn on notifications, because what comes next will not let you breathe. Chapter 4. On the 8th day, Cassius came to the kitchen, not for food. Bet stiffened slightly. Ella knocked over a cup, and Petra went deeply focused on whatever she was cutting. He looked at Emma. "When you are finished," he said, "Mrs. Crane would like to speak with you." Emma nodded. "I am finished now," she said. He did not take her to Mrs. Crane. He took her to a working study on the main floor, papers on the desk, bookshelves that were actually used. He stood in the middle of the room, and she stood near the door. "Mrs. Crane does not actually need to speak with me," Emma said. A pause. "No." "All right," she said. "Lyra has been asking for you," he said. Emma was careful not to let her face change. "I have been in the kitchen." "Yes." He looked at the window briefly, then back at her. "She does not ask for people. She is generally reserved with new individuals. The staff who care for her most regularly took 3 weeks to achieve what appears to have been immediate." Emma did not say anything. "I have a request," he said. "Not an order, a request. I would like to give you an additional assignment, alongside the kitchen work, if you are willing. You may decline. It is not a condition of your employment." "What is the assignment?" she asked. "Time with Lyra. A few hours each afternoon. She has not responded well to the tutors we have engaged." He paused. "She has responded to you." "We spoke once," Emma said, "and this morning through the doorway." She thought about the little girl with the blocks, the uncomplicated brightness of that look, the way she had said Emma's name like it was a fact she had already memorized. She should say no. She was a kitchen worker. This was not her lane. The closer she was to this household, to this man, to whatever her chest was doing every time he was in the same room, the more complicated her already complicated situation became. "I will do it," she said. He nodded once. "Thank you," he said. "You keep thanking me," Emma said, before she could decide not to. "For ordinary things." He looked at her. Something shifted in his face, something careful moving aside briefly to allow something else through. "They do not feel ordinary to me," he said. She looked at him for a moment. Then she turned and went back to the kitchen. Her heart was doing something she did not give it permission to do. The afternoons with Lyra were not what Emma had expected. She had expected a difficult child. But Lyra was not difficult. She was just specific. She did not want to be taught things in the formal sense. She wanted to move, to ask questions that went sideways at unexpected angles, to construct things and then deconstruct them, to be in the garden and in the library and on the floor in equal measure. Emma, who had never been formally taught anything and had acquired everything she knew by moving through the world sideways, understood this completely. She did not try to teach Lyra to sit. She sat on the floor with her. They built things. They went to the garden and crouched over insects. They lay on the library floor with books open sideways and read pictures before they read words. Lyra asked questions without warning and without hierarchy, moving from the name of a stone to the behavior of clouds, to what happened to people when they died, all in the same breath, with the absolute confidence of someone who had decided Emma was a reliable source. Emma answered what she knew, and said plainly when she did not know, which appeared to be the correct approach, because Lyra's respect for her increased visibly on the first day she admitted ignorance. On the third afternoon, Lyra looked up from the figure she was building and said without preamble, "Do you like my papa?" Emma assembled her expression carefully. "I do not know your papa very well," she said. "But when he comes in, you look at him," Lyra said, with the precision of a person who had been watching and recording. "Most people look at people when they enter a room," Emma said. "Not like that," Lyra said. "Like what?" Emma asked, somewhat against her better judgment. Lyra considered this. "Like when I see the cake," she said finally. Emma opened her mouth. She closed it. She cleared her throat. "Your building is very impressive," she said. Lyra looked at her with the serene certainty of a 4-year-old who knew she had won this round. She found out who he was on the 4th afternoon. Marin, the morning caretaker, came in to collect Lyra for her evening bath, and said, in the tone of someone confirming rather than informing, "You did hear that His Majesty will be receiving the Western delegation tomorrow? The wing will be closed for the rest of the day." Emma stilled. "Of course," she said. Marin took Lyra's hand. Lyra waved. The door closed. Emma sat in the empty afternoon room for a long moment. His Majesty, the king's crest on the gate, the guards who materialized at his appearance, the household that moved around him like a tide around a fixed point. His Majesty. She had been bought by the Alpha King. She had wandered into his restricted wing twice. She had spoken to him like he was a person. She pressed her hands flat against her thighs and breathed. Then she stood up and did what she always did when the world rearranged itself into something difficult. She went back to work. Chapter 5. She behaved perfectly for 3 days. Kitchen before 6. No wandering. Correct and pleasant with Lyra. Said very little that was not directly related to building projects. Cassius came to the afternoon sessions twice. The first time, he stood in the doorway for approximately 4 minutes, and then left without speaking. The second time, he stayed. He sat in the chair near the window while Lyra dismantled everything Emma had helped build and rebuilt it according to some internal architectural vision that defied the laws of balance. "You do not talk down to her," Cassius said from the chair. Emma looked up. He was watching Lyra, not her. "There is no reason to," Emma said. Most of her tutors did. They spoke slowly and with great animation, and she found it insulting. "She is 4, not simple," Emma said. "She has very developed observations." Lyra, who had been listening while appearing to focus entirely on her building, said, without looking up, "Emma knows I watch." "Yes," Emma said. "I noticed that." Cassius looked from his daughter to Emma and back, and there was something in his face, in that moment, that Emma saw before she could prevent herself from seeing it. Not authority or assessment, something much quieter and much more undefended. It looked like relief, the kind of relief that came from watching something you had been worried about, quietly and for a long time, be all right. Emma looked back at the building. Her chest was doing the thing again. She handed Lyra a wooden pillar. "Here," she said, "for the corner." The conversation that changed everything happened because of a storm. She had stayed late with Lyra on a Thursday evening. The storm came in from the north faster than anyone had predicted, and by the time Marin arrived to take Lyra for bed, the rain was coming sideways against the windows. "You should not walk back through the open passage in this," Marin said to Emma. "The covered route is through the main hall." The covered route through the main hall took her past the study. The door was open. She would have walked past. She was walking past, eyes forward, pace steady. "Emma." She stopped. He was at his desk, surrounded by paperwork. He had the look of a man who'd been working for too long. "Come in," he said. "The window in this corridor goes directly into the wind, and the glass is old." She came in. He sat back and looked at her. "You know who I am," he said. "Yes," she said. "I know who you are." "Since when?" "Day 4. A pause. "You did not change." "How I behaved." She considered this. "I tried to. For 3 days." Something flickered in his expression. And then I concluded," she said carefully, "that changing how I behaved would require me to stop being useful, and being useful is the only leverage I have in this situation, so it would be tactically poor." He looked at her for a long moment. "That is," he said, "the most honest thing anyone has said to me in approximately 4 years." She held his gaze. The storm pressed against the old glass. "Why did you buy my contract?" she asked. He did not answer immediately. He turned a pen over once in his hands. "I was in the city on business," he said. "I walked past the debt hall. The board was outside." "I know the board," Emma said. "Your name was on it." He paused. "I stopped." She waited. "I do not know how to explain what happened when I stopped," he said, with the specific deliberateness of someone choosing words with great care. "I have been trying to find a way to explain it for 2 weeks. I have not found one." The compass. Emma felt it then, the full weight of it. Not the hum or the pull, but the absolute certainty of it. "I have something to tell you," she said. "It may be relevant." He looked at her. "I do not have a wolf," she said. "I have never shifted. I have no pack. By every measurable definition, I am not a shifter in any functional sense." "I know," he said. "You know," she said. "Your assessment was in the documents." "And you bought my contract anyway?" "Yes." She looked at him. "Why?" she said. Would a bonded alpha experience a pull towards someone with no wolf? The pen stopped moving. Because, he said slowly, I am not bonded. I have never been bonded. What Lyra's mother and I had was a formal arrangement. No bond, no wolf recognition, no mate response. He paused. I had accepted that I simply did not have a mate, that the pull did not work in me the way it worked in others, that I was built differently. Emma was very still. And then, he said, I walked past a board on Mercer Lane. The storm was very loud. The room was very quiet. Emma looked at the man who had paid 3 times the going rate for a wolfless woman, and she felt the thing in her chest, not as a compass, or a pull, or a hum, but as a word she had not let herself use, because it was too large and too certain, and she had spent her whole life being careful about certainty. I need to think, she said. Yes, he said immediately, without argument. Of course. She turned. She stopped at the doorway. The arrangement, she said. My contract. What are the terms? A fixed period, he said, renewable by mutual agreement. You may leave at the end of the period. The debt to House Marrow is settled regardless of your choice. What period? 1 year. She nodded slowly. I will still do my work, she said. I know, he said. She walked out into the corridor. She stood in the noise of the storm for a long moment, with her hand on the cold stone wall, and she thought, this is impossible. And she also thought, I have known impossible things my whole life, and they have mostly turned out to be true. Then she walked back to her room, and lay on her bed, and stared at the ceiling until the storm passed. Do not stop here. What happens next will change everything you think you know about both of them. If you have not subscribed yet, do it now. For every person still watching, this story is for you. Chapter 6. She thought about it for 2 days. Not about whether the pull was real. She had given up that particular argument with herself. What she thought about was what to do with a real thing. She had spent her entire life making practical decisions. She had not attached herself to people she could not afford to lose. She had kept herself small and contained and careful, because in her experience, the cost of wanting things that were too large was paid by the person who wanted them. Cassius was too large. He was a king. He held the highest authority in the Northern Territories. He had a daughter whose parentage was a carefully managed secret, and a household that ran on an intricate system of loyalty and hierarchy. He had responsibilities that would flatten most people. And he had paid 3 times her asking price on a street in the city, apparently because something in him had recognized something in her before his brain had caught up. On the 3rd day, Lyra handed her a piece of bread at breakfast. Your face looks worried, Lyra said. Does it? Emma said. Yes. Lyra ate her own piece. Papa's face looks like that when he is deciding something. Is that so? Yes. Lyra looked at her with those dark eyes that were so much like his. He decides things very slowly, but when he decides, he does not change. Emma looked at the bread in her hands. How do you know that? She asked. Because he decided to keep me, Lyra said simply, and went back to her breakfast, as if this was not a sentence that stopped the world. Emma sat with it for a moment. Then she ate her bread. Then she decided. She found him in the study that evening. She came in and stood in front of his desk and looked at him. I have a condition, she said. He put down his pen. His face was careful and completely present. I am listening, he said. I will not be a formal arrangement, she said. I have spent my entire life accommodating structures, that were not designed for me, and I am no longer willing to disappear into one." He watched her with an expression she had learned to read over the past weeks, something more like the relief she had seen when he watched Lyra, but directed at her now. "If this is real," she said, "and I believe it is real, then it is going to be real in every direction, not just the useful directions. All of them." She held his gaze. "Including the ones that are going to be complicated. They will be very complicated," he said. He said it with a steadiness that was not warning, but acknowledgement. "I know," she said. "I am good with complicated." "What is your condition?" he asked. "That you tell me the truth," she said. "Everything that is relevant to this. No managed information. No decisions made for my own good without my participation. I will not build anything on that foundation." The room was quiet. "All right," he said. "That is it," she said. "That is a significant condition," he said, "and I agree to it." "Then I have something I want to say," she said. He waited. "I have a compass in my chest that has been pointing at you since the debt hall, and I have spent 2 weeks arguing with it, and I am done arguing. But I am also not going to pretend to know something I do not know. We need time." "I have been waiting," he said quietly, "for you to come to a conclusion at your own pace." "I know," she said. "I noticed." Something moved across his face. "How long have you been able to read me?" he asked. "Since the debt hall," she said. He was quiet. Then carefully, slowly, he reached across the desk and held out his hand. Not a command, a question. Emma looked at it. She put her hand in his. The pull in her chest became something else. Not a compass, or a pull, or a hum. A warmth. A settling. The particular sensation of a thing that has been moving towards something for a long time, finally, briefly, touching it. He did not move. He just held her hand. They stayed like that in the quiet study, while the evening settled around the household. Then she pulled her hand back gently. "I am going to bed," she said. "I have work in the morning." "Good night, Emma," he said. "Good night," she said. She walked out. In the corridor, she pressed her back against the wall and looked up at the ceiling. Her heart was doing every single thing she had told it not to do, and for the first time in a very long time, she let it. Chapter 7. The complication arrived 11 days later in the form of a delegation. She was careful not to attach too much to any of it. She was failing at being careful. The delegation from the Eastern Territories arrived on a Tuesday, with 12 riders, 2 senior officials, and a woman. Emma was in the kitchen garden when they came through the gate. Petra, who paid close attention to everything, made a small, sharp sound. "Lady Sereni," Petra said, in the tone of someone recognizing a problem. Emma looked. The woman was extraordinary. Tall, dark-haired, the kind of composed and deliberate beauty that came from both genetics and a lifetime of understanding how to enter rooms. She wore blue and silver and moved like someone who knew exactly where she was going. "Who is she?" Emma asked. Petra looked at her. "You do not know." "I have been here 6 weeks," Emma said. "I know Bet and Mrs. Crane and Marin and the delivery man who smells like fish." "Lady Sereni," Petra said, "is the alpha of the Eastern Territories, and she has been proposed to His Majesty 4 times in 8 years. Emma looked at the woman dismounting in the courtyard. "Proposed or proposing?" she asked. "Both," Petra said. Emma watched Lady Sereni hand her horse off to a groom with the ease of someone who had done this before, in exactly this courtyard. "All right," Emma said. She went back to the herbs. Lady Sereni was in the household for 3 days. Emma did not see Cassius during those days in any of the usual ways. The kitchen work continued. Lyra's afternoons continued. The study was closed. On the second day, Lyra said, apropos of nothing, "The lady has mean eyes." "That is not a kind observation," Emma said. "She looked at you," Lyra said, with the precision of a court recorder, "when you brought the afternoon tray." "People look," Emma said. "Not like that," Lyra said, using the exact same phrasing she had used weeks ago about Emma looking at Cassius. Emma handed her a wooden block. "What are we building today?" she asked. "A tower," Lyra said, "tall enough that you can see all the way to where you want to be." Emma looked at her. "That is very poetic for a 4-year-old, she said. "Papa told me that," Lyra said. "He said, when things are hard, you build the tower taller." Emma placed the base of the tower carefully. "Then let us build it very tall," she said. On the third day, she came face to face with Lady Sereni in the servants' passage. Not the main corridor. The servants' passage. The woman had come looking, which told Emma everything she needed to know. Lady Sereni looked at her and said, "You are the one they bought at the debt hall." "I am," Emma said. "He overpaid," the woman said. "He did," Emma agreed. "You should know," the lady said, "that whatever is happening here, it has happened before. I have watched him pull people close to Lyra only to step back from them entirely. He simply does not know how to let things be real." A pause. "I know him, and you do not." Emma considered this. "That is true," she said. "I do not know him the way you do." Lady Sereni waited. "I know him," Emma said, "the way he has been when he forgot to manage how he was being seen. I know what his face looks like when he is not bracing for something. I know what he sounds like when he says thank you for something ordinary, which is every time he says it, because nothing is ordinary to him. And I know," she added, "that he has been building a tower for a long time." A silence. "You are not what I expected," Lady Sereni said. "I am rarely what people expect," Emma said. She nodded once and walked back down the passage toward her room. She heard, behind her, the sound of footsteps going in the other direction. Lady Serena's delegation left the next morning. That evening, there was a knock on her door. She opened it. Cassius was standing in the servants' corridor, the king of the Northern Territories, in the servants' corridor, at the door of a wolfless woman from the debt hall on Mercer Lane, looking at her with an expression that had given up on being managed. "I owe you an explanation," he said. "You do not," she said. "I understand the nature of delegations. Emma." The way he said her name had a weight to it that she was not prepared for. She opened the door wider. He came in. He stood in the middle of her small room and said, "Lady Sereni believes I am incapable of letting things be real." "I know," Emma said. "She told me." Something moved in his expression. "She spoke to you. In the servants' passage. She came looking. What did you say?" "I told her what I know of you," Emma said simply. He was quiet. "She is not wrong," he said. "I have stepped back. From everything. For years. I told myself proximity to me creates risk. That what happened with Lyra's mother, bringing someone into this life and having it not hold, was something I could not do again." Emma looked at him. "And now," she said. He looked back at her. "Now," he said, "I am standing in the servants' corridor, in a room that is the size of my study closet, which means I have stopped stepping back." Emma's chest did the thing. The warm thing. The settling thing. She sat down on the bed and looked up at him. "Then stop explaining," she said, "and sit down." He sat in the small chair by the window. He was too large for it, but occupied it without complaint. "I have never shifted," Emma said. "There will be people who find that unacceptable." "Yes," he said. "That does not trouble you." He looked at her. "Nothing about you troubles me," he said. "Everything about this situation is complicated, and none of it is about you." She held his gaze. "I am still going to do the kitchen work," she said. Something broke open in his face. Not a smile, not quite, but the thing a face does before it learns how to smile again after forgetting. "I know," he said. She looked at the window. "Explain the crest to me," she said. "What it means, what it requires, all of it." He began, and she listened, in her small room on a quiet evening, to the king of the Northern Territories explain the world he lived in, as if he had been waiting, for a very long time, for someone to ask. Chapter 8. What followed was not a story of smooth waters. The court found out slowly, and then suddenly. The slowly was 6 weeks of deliberate discretion. They existed in the careful space of a thing that was real, but not yet announced, learning each other the way people learn things they intend to keep. She learned that he took his morning work seriously, and should not be disturbed before 8. She learned that he had not taken a day that was not structured around obligation in years, which she found unacceptable, and told him so directly one evening when he mentioned without complaint that he had not left the compound in 2 months. He had looked at her as if the observation required processing. The following Sunday, he had appeared in the kitchen garden at midday, and said simply that he had the afternoon free and did not know what to do with it. She had handed him a basket and told him to carry things, and they had walked the boundary of the far orchard in the autumn cold for an hour, without speaking much, and it had been, she thought, the most honest piece of time she had spent with another person in years. She learned that Lyra had his specific quality of attention, the absolute focus that looked, from the outside, like stillness, and was actually the opposite. He learned that she did not want to be managed, on several occasions, and adapted quickly. He learned that she had opinions about the administrative structure of the household that were correct. She would share them once, and not repeat them. He implemented most of them. The suddenly was a court dinner. The gathering was necessary and political, scheduled to include 12 senior alphas and their representatives. Cassius told her about it the week before. "You will be at the dinner," he said. She looked at him. "Not as staff," he added, with the care of someone who had prepared this sentence. "That is a significant introduction," she said. "Yes. There are those who will say a wolfless woman cannot hold a genuine bond," she said. "Yes. And you." "My wolf disagrees," he said simply, "and has disagreed since the debt haul. My wolf has never been particularly confused about this. Only I have." She thought about the compass in her chest. "I would need a dress," she said. Something in his expression did what it had been doing more often lately. That not quite smile thing. "That can be arranged," he said. "I am not going to perform anything," she said. "I am going to be exactly what I am." "I know," he said. "That is why I want you there." She had dressed carefully, in deep green that Lyra had declared definitive and perfect, and she had walked into the room beside Cassius, and stood there while 12 senior alphas and their entourages registered the fact of her existence. The Western alpha was there. She recognized him from the debt hall. He looked at her for a long moment, and then looked at Cassius. Cassius looked back. Something passed between them in that silence, the particular language of alphas at high levels of authority, and the Western alpha looked away first. Emma noted that. Lady Serene was also present. She looked at Emma across the room and nodded, once, with the expression of someone who had processed a change and decided to proceed with it. Emma nodded back. She was there to stand beside him. She ate her dinner. She listened. She asked 2 questions during the political discussion that were precise and landed correctly, which she could see in the particular silence that followed them, the silence of people recalibrating. On her left, a regional alpha from the northern border leaned and said quietly, "You are not what we expected." "I know," she said. "The bond question will be raised formally," he said, "at the council." "I imagine it will," she said. "What will you say?" Emma looked at the question. "I will say," she said carefully, "that a bond is a recognition between 2 specific beings, not a category that can be confirmed or denied by committee, and that the only wolves whose business it is are the 2 who are experiencing it." He looked at her. "That will not satisfy everyone," he said. "It is not designed to satisfy everyone," she said. "It is designed to be true." He was quiet. Then he laughed, briefly, genuinely. "Fair enough," he said. Chapter 9. The council raised the bond question 3 weeks later. Emma was not in the room. This had been her suggestion. Her presence would center the conversation on her rather than on the question. And the question was better answered without her, as a visual argument for or against. She was in the small library off the main hall with Lyra when Mrs. Crane appeared in the doorway. "Miss Emma," she said, "the council has asked to speak with you." Emma closed the book. "Now?" she said. "Yes," Mrs. Crane said, and there was something in her expression that was not administrative neutrality. It looked, in fact, like solidarity. Emma looked at Lyra. "Finish the chapter," Emma said. "I will come back." "I know," Lyra said, in the precise cadence of her father. Emma walked down the corridor to the council chamber. She walked slowly enough to breathe. She had faced assessments before. She had faced the debt hall with its board and its bidders, and the particular silence of people deciding her value. She had faced Mrs. Crane on her first day, and the Western Alpha's stare at the dinner, and Lady Serene in the servants' passage. She knew how to walk into a room that did not want her in it. She pushed the door open and went in. The room held 9 senior alphas and Cassius at the head of the table. Cassius looked at her when she entered, and she read his face immediately. He had not known they were going to summon her. He was managing the surprise, without showing it in any way that would appear weak. She walked to the table and stood. "We have been discussing the nature of the bond His Majesty has described," said an older alpha from the southern plains. "It is an unusual situation." "Yes," Emma said. "A bond to a wolfless individual is not documented in any formal record." "Records document what has been recorded," Emma said, "not what is possible." A pause in the room. "The question before this council," said another member, "is whether the bond as described meets the criteria for formal recognition." Emma looked at him. "I am not asking for recognition," she said. Something shifted in the room. "I am not asking this council for anything," she continued. "The bond is what it is. It does not require your documentation to be real." She paused. "What you are actually trying to determine is whether a wolfless woman presents a political liability. That is a different question." No one spoke. She looked at Cassius. He was looking at her with an expression she had not seen before. Not the not-quite smile. Something more complete than that. Something that had stopped being careful. She looked back at the council. I spent 22 years being assessed by people who concluded I had no value because I had no wolf, she said. I have some experience with the question, and my answer, which has not changed, is that I am not a category. I am Emma, and what His Majesty and I have is real. That is the only thing I am here to confirm. The room was very quiet. The Southern Alpha looked at her for a long moment. Then he looked at Cassius. Something passed between them. She will do very well, the Southern Alpha said, in the tone of a verdict. Emma looked at him. I know, she said. Chapter 10. Lyra found out in the spring. Not about the bond, because Lyra had known about the bond in the way small children knew things that adults were still arguing about. Directly, and without ceremony, she found out about the formal arrangement. Emma was in the garden with her, the same kitchen garden where she had first seen Lady Sereni's delegation arrive, when Cassius came out and sat on the low stone wall. Lyra, he said, there is something I want to tell you. Lyra looked up from the flower she was examining. Emma is going to stay, he said, not just as your afternoon companion. She is going to stay properly. Lyra looked at Emma. Emma looked back. I know, Lyra said. You know, Emma said. You looked at each other like the cake, Lyra said, using the established notation, and went back to the flower. Emma pressed her lips together. Cassius looked at her over Lyra's head. She looked back. She is 4, Emma said. She is very advanced, he said. She looked at the garden, at the spring light coming through the far trees, at the small girl examining a flower with the complete focused attention of someone who found the world endlessly interesting. She thought about the board on Mercer Lane. She thought about the man in the back row who had paid 3 times the going rate and then gone still when she looked at him. She thought about a compass and what it meant when the thing it had been pointing at was actually there. I have one more condition, she said. Cassius waited. Lyra learns her own history, Emma said. All of it. In time. Truthfully. A pause. Agreed, he said. Without hesitation. She nodded. She sat down on the low stone wall beside him. Not because she was performing anything. Not because she had been told to. Because it was where she wanted to be. And she had decided some time ago in a small room on a stormy night that she was done not wanting the things she wanted. His shoulder was against hers. The garden was full of spring. Lyra looked up from the flower and said, matter of fact, this one is called anemone. Is that so? Emma said. Papa told me, Lyra said. He knows all of them. Emma glanced at Cassius. He was looking at the garden. But there was something on his face that was fully, completely, unflinchingly real. And she knew it was there because they had both kept their conditions, and they had built the thing not on managed distance, but on truth. She looked back at the garden too. The light moved through the trees. Lyra moved to the next flower. And Emma, who had grown up without a wolf, and without a pack, and without a single thing the world told her she needed in order to belong to something, sat in the spring garden of the Northern King, and felt for the first time in her life the specific and irreversible sensation of being exactly where her own compass had been pointing all along. Thank you so much for staying until the very end. If this story moved you, if you held your breath when Emma walked into that council chamber, if you smiled when Lyra said she knew, then this channel is for you. Subscribe now and turn on notifications so you never miss a story. Every week, a new world. Every story built for people who want to feel something real. The link is in the description. I read every single comment. Tell me what you felt. See you in the next one.